Okay, this video is about mercury chelation. So chelation is when you take a pill or you get injected with a medication and it travels through your body to remove a toxic substance. Okay, now this is a guy by the name of Boyd Haley, and he's an Irish-American biochemist, very smart guy. He figured out a lot of very useful things about how mercury is toxic to the human body, and then he later figured out an effective way to treat it. And it's really an interesting story, and it'll also show you how things go down in the real world, not in the fantasy, BS college world, what they teach you, grad school world, but in the real world. So he figured out, some of these things about mercury's mechanism. So basically, mercury, it's like designed by the devil. Okay, it'll have a non-polar, uncharged valence. Mercury vapor, Hg, like elemental mercury, can cross the blood-brain barrier. Okay, it can come out of your fillings, cross the blood-brain barrier, travel through your veins, travel along your nerves. Methyl mercury or ethyl mercury, those are organic forms bound to carbon compounds. Okay, they also are non-polar. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. Then, once it's in the cytoplasm, the mercury gets converted into Hg2+, Fe2+, iron 2+. Okay. And it's attracted to the mitochondria because inside the mitochondrial matrix, you got a very negatively charged gradient, like negative 160 millivolts, negative 180 millivolts even. So it goes into the mitochondria. And then what's unique about mercury is that it binds very strongly to sulfur. And within the electron transport chain, you have these iron sulfur centers that are part of the mechanism to transfer electrons down the electron transport chain, like a fireman bucket brigade, till it reaches oxygen, the ultimate electron acceptor. But here's the problem. The mercury grabs onto the sulfur more tightly than iron can. It has a higher binding affinity such that it displaces the iron off of the sulfur. So the iron falls off the sulfur and it drops into the mitochondrial matrix. And once the iron drops into the mitochondrial matrix, it's free iron. That means it's not bound to anything. You don't want that. Iron is like fire. You want fire in your house, in your stove to cook your food. You want fire in your house, in the fireplace to keep the house warm, but you don't want fire anywhere else. That's what iron is like in the human body. When iron gets free on its own, it'll Ferris redox cycle, Fe2 plus Fe3 plus Fe2 plus Fe3 plus, bouncing back and forth between those valences and giving off electrons. And these can participate and become even autocatalytic in the Fenton reaction, whereby you will then produce hydroxyl radicals, which are a very aggressive free radical that can damage the DNA in the mitochondria, and the mitochondria then won't be able to replicate itself. It'll be short-lived. It can also damage the intermitochondrial membrane itself, undergo lipid peroxidation chain reactions. That's all bad. In addition, once you knock off the iron from the iron sulfur centers, now you can't transport electrons effectively down that intermitochondrial membrane electron transfer chain through the complexes. So what that means is you're going to start dropping electrons down into the mitochondrial matrix. When you drop those electrons down into the mitochondrial matrix, they're going to combine with oxygen. They're going to produce superoxides, free radicals, unpaired electron in the outer orbital, with the net result that those can, hopefully they'll typically be neutralized by, catalase and whatnot, glutathione peroxidase, but they can also head towards these reactions of forming more aggressive free radicals like the hydroxyl radicals, like in conjunction with the Fenton reaction, Fe for Fenton, Fe for iron. And you could also even end up down the other pathway, down the peroxynitrite pathway, the no pathway, by combining with nitric oxide. So we're not going to get into all that right now, but what I'm trying to say is mercury's bad, really bad. And by blocking your electron transport system, it's blocking your ability to produce ATP. And what that means is you're going to have less energy. And it's even worse than that. This affinity for binding sulfurs enables it to bind to hemoglobin in the blood, and it also interferes with heme synthesis, and it will decrease the oxygen carrying capacity of your blood. So you're double screwed. You can't make ATP as much as you normally should, and you can't carry oxygen as well as you normally should in your red blood cells. That's why sometimes the hemoglobin going up, even over 50, is an indicator of mercury toxicity. Okay, I'm telling you all the bad stuff, and this is going to be kind of like a good news, bad news lecture. So here's just more from the lecture slides of the ideas of Boyd Haley. Okay, very clever biochemist, figuring all this stuff out and how it all goes together. This is just talking about the Fenton reaction. Okay, he's also talking about the superoxides from the electron leakage due to a blockage in electron transport. Okay, so this guy figured out how you could chelate iron. The traditional chelators that everybody's heard of, things like EDTA, DMSA, they don't work well for mercury because mercury is largely an intracellular problem. You have to have something that can get into the cell and take mercury out. So these chelators that travel in the blood, they're not going to get that much mercury out. Okay, so he figured out something that works. He calls it MBMI, but he also gave it another name, and he started a company called Emeride, okay? And when it was sold as a supplement, that was allowed for a little while, but it was clear that it was effectively removing mercury. So then it was declared, well, if it effectively is doing something with a medical effect, then it's not really a supplement, it's a drug. And if it's a drug, then it should have to go under a formal approval process. But the problem is the formal approval process is super expensive. And, he doesn't have any money. And no big company thinks it's worth the risk. And then other companies don't want the problem fixed. I would just guess the billionaire perverts don't. The billionaire perverts, they've got enough money to fund this guy, but they don't want to do it. So here's this company, Emeramed, okay? Tons and tons and tons of people suffer from mercury toxicity, literally hundreds of millions, okay? Think how many people have mercury amalgams, eat too much fish, etc. And all these people could be helped, okay? So they basically have effectively taken it off the market because you see the dilemma. He's in the middle of a double screw job. It's not allowed to be sold as a supplement because everybody knows it does something powerful and important, but it's not allowed to be approved of as a drug because they can't afford to send it through the necessary clinical trials. People always talk about these billionaire technology guys, Steve Jobs, like he's some, hero to mankind. What did he do? He made a tracking device, okay, to track you. If he put a dog collar on people with a little bell on it, it's essentially the same thing. People wouldn't like that. But, it's a cell phone, so they're tracked like animals everywhere they go, everything they do. And the stupid low IQ pros are okay with that. But what I'm trying to say, one of these guys with all that money, he could just donate a little bit of money. It would only take, I don't know how many million, but it would take, some millions. Then they could run all these studies. $10 million. And even if you sell it over the counter, so many people are going to take it because it can go into the cell and it can take out the free iron. It can take out the it can take out the mercury. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is this is how stuff goes down in the real world. Even when something actually works, it gets blocked because nobody gives a rat's tail about helping those stupid pros. So, what can you do? Well, you can sweat a lot. I'll often I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I've got a t-shirt underneath. I'm going to sweat more. Because your your sweat glands are like little kidneys, they're like little pores, and they excrete mercury from your body. So the more you sweat, the more of it you would excrete. And what you really need to do is just excrete a little bit more every day than you take in from the environment, from your food, from your amalgams if you have any, and then you can stay ahead of it. And that's what you want to try to do. So you can slow down the inevitable deterioration of aging and potential heavy metal toxicity. But I think it's important to get this, that the billionaire perverts, they're not going to let a drug like this get accepted. So there's never going to be a drug like this. So, by the way, billions and billions of dollars are spent on trying to get approval for a piece of crap, drugs that don't work, chemotherapy, drugs that don't work, other medications, hypertension, diabetes, drugs that don't work. But when something that actually really does work, because it's been proven to work on a bunch of non-official type clinical trials, it's blocked. Nobody with power and money wants this on the market. Nobody wants to protect the poor proles from mercury. What a freaking disaster.